the previous section, we have seen how to deploy the changes from our VS Code to the Salesforce org, and we've also seen how to retrieve the changes that are there in the Salesforce org to our VS Code. Now, since we have the setup ready, where our VS Code is able to connect to the Salesforce org, and we are able to retrieve and deploy the changes using the VS Code, it is the high time for us to see how exactly we can create our first LWC component. How do I go ahead and create my LWC component? Use Ctrl+Shift+P to initiate your command palette, or use View and then click on command palette, so that way this section comes up. What am I interested in? I'm interested in creating a Lightning component. So I'll say SFDX create, and that is where I see an option where it says SFDX create Lightning web component. As soon as I click on it, it would ask me for the name that I wanted to give to the LWC component that I'm creating here. So I'll go ahead and write it as first LWC component demo. So this is the name of the component that I've given here. I've wantedly named everything in small case here. And once done, click on enter. Now it is asking me, where do you want to save this one? Which is giving me a folder path which is under Force app. Where do I have my Force app? Here is my Force app. Under that Force app, under the main, under that we have a default folder. Inside that we have LWC component. It is asking me, do you want to create it there? Since I have showing you this folder structure, I have missed out creating that Lightning component. Let's quickly go ahead and do that once more. Create Lightning web component, give a name to it, first demo LWC component. Whatever that component is doing, feel free to give a meaningful name here. So since my component is something that I am using for the first time, I'm giving this name. It would be easier for us to look out for this component and use it for our LWC learning. So once done, click on enter. Now it is asking me for the file path that I've shown you earlier. I want this LWC component to be created under the Force app main folder. Under the default, I have an LWC folder. I want this LWC component to be created under that same folder itself. So I'll go ahead and select that option. So as soon as I do that, there are few things that are happening. So I can see that command successfully ran from that pop-up that came. And also I can see that there is a component with the name that I have given in the command palette got created. First demo LWC component is the name of that LWC component that I have created. Now inside that, what we have three files. One is the HTML file, another one is the JS file, another one is .js-metadata.xml. If you see here, all these three files are having the same name of my component. This is an indication that I'm looking at this particular component, which is first demo LWC component. Now, what are these three files are and what is its purpose? This HTML file is basically used for designing the UI part, and this JS file, it's a controller which would have the business logic that is needed. Last but not the least, we have .js-metadata.xml. The main purpose of this file is to decide where can I use my LWC component. So if I have to specify where can somebody use this LWC component, I can do it here. There are other things that also that we can do using this file. For time being, let's restrict our understanding to the point where this file is mainly this file basically decides where this component that we are creating can be used. If you see here, it is bundled under the folder name that we have created the LWC component. All these files are bundled under this folder structure. In case if you want to deploy the entire LWC component, deploy this folder structure and you will see those changes in your org. We can talk about more on the architecture of this LWC component as in when we progress through our course. For time being, let's create our first LWC component, so that way it would give us an idea on how exactly this component would look like once we deploy it. So let's create our first component, which would give us more idea on how it works and what are the things that we can do and what is the process of deployment. How do I make sure that this LWC component is available for the people to use, and where can I use it, and how can I add that to the Lightning experience. So all these things can be discussed once we start working on the first component. So if you see here, I have 3 files. First file is mainly meant for the UI. Second file, .js file, is basically meant for the business logic and the processing that we need to do. And third file decides where I can use this. It decides where this LWC component can be used. I'll open my UI file, the .html file. In that file, what I'll simply say, this is my first LWC component. I've simply written some text here. One interesting point that we have noticed here is, as soon as I open this file, there is a tag that I see. What is that tag? There is a template tag that is there. And towards the end on line number 3, I have an and tag for the same tag. So in case if you are familiar with the HTML tags, this is your start tag and this is your end tag. In your LWC component, anything that you want to write should be enclosed within these 2 tags. Template tag, start tag, and this is the end tag. If you are not familiar with HTML, any tag that has this backslash is considered as an end tag. The same tag without that backslash is called as your start tag. You would have a start tag and an end tag. So that is something that you can notice here. Also, I have added some text here, so that way, whenever I add this component, it would help us understand that what are the text that I'm displaying or what are the text that I'm writing here would be displayed to the end user. Remember, this HTML tag is mainly meant for providing the user interface to the end user. Right, so I've written this single line here, and I'm not making any change in my JS file. This is all pre-built code, and I'm not making any change in this .js-meta.xml. Now, how do I deploy this LWC component? Simply right-click on the folder and then say deploy source to the org. Most of the times, if you are starting in new, you would deploy a single HTML file. That is where you might not end up deploying the changes. It is always recommended to deploy the entire folder structure so that the changes would go at once. We were successfully able to deploy this LWC component. If you see here, we are able to deploy it. All the 3 files were deployed. Now we can switch to our Salesforce org to see if we are able to see the changes. I'm on my Salesforce org. Now, if you see here, we have deployed a LWC component. From where we have deployed from VS Code. In our previous discussion, when we deployed a class, we know that there is a deployment that is associated when we push the changes from our VS Code to the Salesforce org. Let's quickly check that out. I'll go to the setup, search for deployment. Under the deploy, I'll click on the deploy status just to show you that the deployment has been initiated. And if I scroll down and look for the time frame when I've deployed it, this is the latest deployment that happened. If I open it, it talks about one component being deployed, right, which is success. Now, where do I find this component? Since it is a LWC component, I need to add them to the pages that I'm looking at. Let's say for time being, I wanted to add this on the case record. I'm opening one of the case record, and I want to add that LWC component somewhere here, just above the milestones component. How do I do it? In case if you're familiar with the app builder, that is where you might have got a thought that, yes, I'll go ahead and edit the page. And once I edit that page, Salesforce will be giving me an option to add the component from the list of available components onto the page that I'm editing. Right, so we are currently on the Lightning app builder, and here are the list of standard components. This is the record page of the case would look like. Now, if I look at the left-hand side, I have standard components. Am I interested in adding a standard component? The answer is no. I'm looking for that LWC component that I have built as a part of my LWC learning. Now, if I scroll down to this bottom, I would be seeing a custom section where I have custom components. Is this the components that I have deployed? The answer is no. This is not the one, this is not the one, this is not the one. My component name is first demo LWC CMP. Do I have that here? The answer is no. If I go back to the VS Code, it says that my component has been deployed. My component got deployed, but why am I not seeing the changes? The answer resides in your js-metadata.xml. What does this file talks about? This file talks about where can I use this LWC component? Is this component visible to everyone or not? Now, if you see here, under this file, first demo LWC component, this is the component that I've built. If I open this file, that is where I see some XML content here. It talks about the version. It talks about is exposed. So currently, what is the value that has been set? The value that has been set is false. Now, if you see here, our component is not been exposed on the Lightning record page. And this is exposed attribute is set to false. Let's make it as true. Save these changes. Deploy this component to see if we are able to see that changes again. I'll deploy it again to see if we are able to see this component this time on that record page. Our deployment has been successfully ran. Let's go back to our Salesforce org where I've edited the page. Do a refresh here. Now I'm interested in that component that I have made a change on. Do I see that component here? The answer is no again. Now, why is it happening? Earlier it was set to false. Is exposed is set to false. That is where the component is not being exposed. Now I have set it to true. Even then I am not able to see it. Now it makes me wonder why is there an attribute that is having is exposed, and why Salesforce is asking me to set it as true or false. There is a concept that we need to know to better understand this attribute. For time being, in case if you want to expose your LWC component, you need to set that value to true. Now you might have a question saying that even though if I've set that value to true, why am I not able to see that component in the record page? For that, we need to look at this file in detail. So what I'll do, I'll go back to the Salesforce org and open the documentation related to LWC. If I open the documentation related to the configuration file, the .js-meta.xml file, this is what the documentation talks about. So if you see here, we have set this attribute to true. Even then we are not able to see it. But how do I expose this LWC component so that way I can use it in this record page? What should I do? So if you see here, there is a link that is there at the bottom. If I click on that link, it takes me to a page where it talks about define the component metadata in the configuration file. So what exactly this file talks about? It talks about the targets that I need to set so that the Salesforce understands whether it has to expose that LWC component so that can be used in the record page or not. We can do the other things also. We can expose that in the home page. You can expose in the app page. For time being, what I'll do, I'll take the code that is needed for me to expose that LWC component at the record level. So if you see here, if you set this target value as lightning underscore record page, that is where this component would be available for me to use it in the record page. Since that value is not been set, my component has been not displayed here. Let's fix that out. I've copied the code. I'm going back to I'm pasting the code that I've copied from that documentation and closing the tags accordingly. What we have done so far, we have exposed this LWC component by setting this value as true. And also we have set the targets where this LWC component can be used. Currently where it can be used at a record page. How did I mention that? By writing this line within the target. Can this LWC component be used at a home page also? Yes, it can be. All you need to do is add an extra target which says lightning __ home page. Since I want this component to be added or only to be exposed at the home page, I have not done that. So I've just set it to record page itself. Now if I've made a change to my LWC component, time for it to be deployed. So I'm using that option called deploy to the org. The deployment is successful. Let's switch to our Salesforce org. Go back to the record page, do a hard refresh. What is a hard refresh? Hard refresh is nothing but asking the system to consider the latest changes that we have instead of getting it from the cache. How do I do that? By simply using Control R in case if you are using Windows operating system. In case if you are using a Mac, then use Command R. Now again I'll scroll down on the left hand side to see if my component is available. If you see earlier there were only 4, this time we have 5, and this is my component that I have deployed. Now we are successfully able to expose that component, and also this component is available for me to be used in the record page. How do I add this component to this page? Simply drag that component and paste it here. So this is the place that I want this component to be added. Once I'm happy with it, I'll click on save. Again, basics of app builder. In case if this page is not been assigned to the profiles depending on your configuration, feel free to click on activate. You should be seeing a pop-up where it would ask you to decide whether you want to keep this record page as a default at the org level, or default to an app, or default to the profile and an app configuration. For time being, I'm not doing that. So what I'll do, I'll go to the record and see if we have that changes handy. I'm going back to the case tab here. I'm going to the case tab here. The reason being I have added that component on a case record page. So I'll go there, open any record. So if you see here, whatever that I have deployed is being displayed here. So this is my first LWC component. Congratulations, we are able to successfully deploy our LWC component, added that to the record page, and we have also understood the process of exposing our LWC component for a record page and also allowing the users to identify our LWC component. So that brings us to the end of this section. In the next section, we'll add few more details to this first component that we have deployed, and we'll see how that goes.
Hey guys, if you like this video, do like, share and subscribe to SFDC Quest.